Hello, and thank you for watching this regional forecast for the Corn Belt. I'm Andrew Pritchard, Senior Meteorologist with Nutrien Ag Solutions. So you look at the satellite picture here early on Tuesday morning, very quiet across much of the Corn Belt. We've got our cutoff low spinning away across the mid-Atlantic with widespread clouds and showers and storms in that region. We've also got an upper-level trough kind of spinning away off the Pacific coast with the first of several shortwaves making their way across the Dakotas this afternoon and tomorrow. That's going to lead to the chance for scattered storms, maybe a few severe storms across the northern high plains as we get into the afternoon hours again today and tomorrow. Nothing going on right now as we look at the radar here on Tuesday morning. Quiet across essentially the entire Corn Belt. Maybe some very light showers across parts of the Dakotas, parts of the Great Lakes here, northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP of Michigan, but very quiet elsewhere across the Corn Belt. Warm in the west, cooler in the east. The eastern Corn Belt still enjoying that cooler, drier air mass here in Champaign, Illinois, where we're recording this video right now. It is again a cool 59 out there. Meanwhile, a muggier low 70s from the southern plains all the way up through the central and northern plains today. Again, it'll be this region we'll be watching for those showers and storms late today. So we look at the severe weather threat for today. This would be Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday. Highest today and tomorrow across the Dakotas. Quiet, really, for the next several days across a huge chunk of the Corn Belt. That severe weather threat going to be, again, focused across the northern plains, where we'll also be seeing blustery, kind of a hot, windy conditions over the next couple of afternoons. Again, those winds coming out of the southeast, blowing 20 to 30 knots during the afternoon hours across the Dakotas, all the way down into the central plains. We'll see a very similar look as we head into Wednesday afternoon and evening. Those winds, again, becoming quite blustery, quite strong out of the south. A hot, dry wind coming out of the southern plains. And that actually eats into the thunderstorm threat just a little bit. So we kind of look at the dew points across the region. First, we've got our cool, dry air mass coming out of the Great Lakes here, impacting the eastern half of the Corn Belt. But I want you to kind of watch the return flow off the Gulf of Mexico. We are starting to get some return flow out of here, but as this passes over, kind of a recently drought-stricken southern plains and panhandle region, it really kind of eats into some of the moisture there. So we are getting some moisture transport northward, once again back to the Dakotas, but I think in better circumstances here with a better moisture return flow, maybe eliminating the drought across this region, we may see a more robust severe weather threat across the Dakotas over the next 48 hours. But as such, let's look at the high-resolution NAM model, take it over the next couple of days. As we head into the mid-afternoon hours, remaining quiet across the northern plains. As we head into the late evening hours, we'll watch parts of the western Dakotas for some of those scattered storms to flare up, continuing into the overnight. And then maybe a slightly more widespread threat as we head into the afternoon on Wednesday. This will be sunrise on Wednesday. Again, a very quiet morning across the entire Corn Belt. As we get into the mid-afternoon hours, into the evening hours along that frontal boundary, watching for thunderstorms to erupt during the late afternoon, evening, and early overnight hours across the Dakotas into northwest Minnesota, perhaps looking at a squall line or an MCS across this region, producing some heavy rain locally and maybe some gusty winds as well. We'll take this on into Thursday, mid-afternoon, again watching that thunderstorm threat greatest across the Dakotas into the upper Midwest, continuing to be dry elsewhere across the Corn Belt, at least as we head into the weekend, before we begin to see a bit of a pattern change. So total precipitation between now and midday on Thursday, again, focused across the Dakotas, the upper Midwest, parts of Minnesota, dry elsewhere as we head into the middle and late part of the week across the Corn Belt. Big changes, though, as we look at days 4 to 10. If I kind of flip back, we see dry across the central U.S. into the eastern Corn Belt. If we go ahead and look at the forecast here that would take it from the weekend into next week, we're seeing almost a flip of the script, drier across the Dakotas into the Canadian Prairie with an area of anomalous wet conditions from the central plains into the central and eastern Corn Belt. The reason for that, we've got a big pattern change. Right now, that trough in the west, ridging across the central U.S., that's the reason for the more active pattern across the northwest and into the northern plains, and that is also the reason for the drier conditions here across the midsection of the country. But let's take a look at how things evolve as we head into the end of the week, the weekend, and early next week. We're going to watch this trough begin to migrate off to the north and to the east into the Canadian Prairie as we head into the end of the week here, Thursday and Friday. At the same time, though, we're going to watch a ridge begin to amplify off to the north, and that's going to send this trough a little bit further south. It's going to send it diving back down to the south as we get into the weekend and early next week, such that as we get into here Sunday, Monday, now we're seeing this evolution where we've got the trough setting up here kind of on over Ontario, whereas the main axis of that trough is, with a ridge building back in across the west. So between that, we get very strong jet stream winds here and a northwest flow, and I know that's a term that we know here in the ag world across the Corn Belt here, because northwest flow, that sets us up for a much more active pattern here with those strong jet stream winds over the top of what's going to be a much more humid air mass across the region. Right now, we can take a look at the precipitation, or the precipitable water. This is the moisture content within the atmosphere. And as I hit play, you're going to first see kind of the drier air being pushed in from the west with this current pattern. Moisture kind of trying to funnel up here into the high plains. But watch what happens here as we get into the weekend and early next week. You're going to see a bit of a flip here. Watch the Gulf of Mexico as it begins to open up right here. We're into Thursday, now getting into Friday, Saturday, now we're into the weekend. Now we're opening up the Gulf of Mexico. It starts to speed up there, so I want to drag the slider back. Another thing I want to point out here, we're again watching this frontal boundary for showers and storms across the Dakotas and the upper Midwest as we head through Wednesday, Thursday, and then into Friday. Watch this frontal boundary, though, as it begins to get dragged into the Corn Belt, kind of dragging and lingering back there towards the west. Well, this is going to settle somewhere here in the central U.S. So you can kind of see it just elongating here east to west across this region. Where exactly it's going to stall out, how long it stalls, we're not quite, or the details, I guess, are fuzzy at this point. But you kind of watch the scroller up here. Again, it speeds up, but this is a prolonged pattern here. Saturday, Sunday, getting into Monday, Tuesday, now into Wednesday and Thursday. As this happens, you know, this air mass, we're looking at instability now that's been completely stabilized across this region. We see a big change here as we get into now. Here's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm going to hit pause. I'm going to take it in manual control here. Now look at this, getting into Sunday and Monday, into Tuesday. So we've got an air mass now that we're getting transport northward from the Gulf of Mexico. You add some humidity to this mid-June air mass, you're going to get a very unstable environment. So we've got an unstable environment across the central U.S. We've got strong jet stream winds now coming out of the northwest interacting with that. And that's just going to set up the stage for multiple rounds of showers and storms across the region. This is the lightning forecast from the European model. Obviously, this is not gospel. This isn't how it's going to play out, but you can see the transition here from a very dry and quiet pattern here across the midsection of the country. No thunderstorm activity. It's been several days since we saw any. It will be several days until we see any. But as we get into now, here's Thursday. Getting into Friday, you're seeing this frontal boundary slowly making its way into the region before it kind of stalls out. And so here we go into Saturday. Now we're seeing this corridor kind of lighting back up, getting into Sunday and Monday. Getting into Tuesday, you're seeing the regeneration. Of course, it's not confined to this circle, but this is one that I'm going to be most concerned about here for the repeated rounds of showers and storms across the region. So let's look at it in a way that makes a little bit more sense here, the precipitation forecast and our surface pressure over the next several days. Watching for that thunderstorm threat to be greatest across the Dakotas into northwest Minnesota as we head through the next couple of days. We're getting into Friday now. You can see the frontal boundary kind of dragged back across the central plains, only to stall out across the region as we get into the weekend. So here is now Saturday. This is when I think things are going to kind of turn on across this region. So dry conditions through the end of the week with an active pattern resuming as we get into Saturday. And then again, we'll talk about the details on this as we get a bit closer, because it's going to be very nuanced. We'll be looking for surface boundaries, kind of leftovers from yesterday's thunderstorms, that kind of situation. A very typical summer pattern that's kind of tough to pin down days out in advance, but we're seeing increasing confidence in this transition to a much more stormy pattern across the central U.S. So through Friday, much of the precipitation going to be confined to the northern plains, the upper Midwest, dry across the midsection. But then as we add in the precipitation here through Monday, again, turning much more active from the central plains into the Ohio River Valley. And I think it's going to be this corridor here, kind of coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, and then curving over into the eastern Corn Belt that I think will be most concerned about repeated showers and storms as we head through week 2. So temperatures, what do? Well, we do see that warmer air mass shifting off to the east into the central and eastern Corn Belt as we get into the late part of the week and the weekend. But then as we get into early next week, things become a bit of a wash. I think we're going to see a break from real extreme heat, not really dipping down into anything, extremely below average, but probably a very close to average pattern as we again talk about much more in the way of showers and thunderstorms across this region with northwest flow, kind of flipping the script here across the midsection of the country. So here are your highs over the next several days. Mid-90s, again, with windy conditions across the northern plains this afternoon. That chance for showers and storms during the evening. Again, the same thing tomorrow. Hot and windy across the northern plains. A chance for afternoon and evening storms popping up, with that heat beginning to shift off to the east as we get into the late part of the week. Here are your highs on Thursday, and then Friday, finishing with those highs on Saturday. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.